Welcome to all participants. Thank you for joining us this morning for the session on the European Space Package. We are very glad to welcome you and especially our speakers. Just at the start, a brief word on NEREUS because we have many newcomers. NEREUS stands for Network of European Regions Using Space Technologies, and we are the only European network bringing together regions in space. Our mission is to spread and promote a better understanding of space technologies, of their potential, what you can do with them in regional contexts, and to promote, to stimulate a broader uptake of space technologies at the side of public administrations and along the whole range of regional communities. We have a flagship initiative, Copernicus for Regions, where we continuously collect new Copernicus use cases, and I invite you to have a look at our website to see the initiative and the different cases. One important aspect of our network is to monitor and to inform about latest space policy developments, inform about relevant EU programs and ESA programs, and have a dialogue with our stakeholder on how are they impacted by these developments. And the EU space package is quite important for our community in almost all regions. SMEs, startups, young enterprises are the protagonists. Regions design policies and strategies in their regions to promote the space sector, to be strong space locations and contribute to the development of the downstream sector. Our vision in the whole discussion is on the whole ecosystem. And seeing space as an integrated system in the whole regional ecosystem. That is also how we look on the proposal of the European Commission. With that being said, I'm still here. When you have questions, please write all your questions in the chat. You are too many. We have today more than 250 registered participants. I can't see you all. Please write in the chat. We will constantly monitor the chat and get back to your question. It's very important to us, the interaction with you. Please mute all yourself, otherwise it will be too difficult. And with this being said, I like to give the floor to the European Commission. The European Commission published on the 25th of June its long-awaited proposal of the EU space package, comprised of the EU Space Act and the vision of a European space economy. I'm very pleased to have today with us Zuzana Mazzanova. Zuzana Mazzanova is working in DG DEFIS, and she is the head of the Union Single Space Market, which is also one important aspect of the Space Act, the creation of a common space market with the liberties that we know from the common market. Please, Zuzana, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Raya, and good morning to everyone. So I'll try to share my presentation. Let's hope this works. Can you please tell me if you can see my screen?
Yes, everything works. Thank you, Zuzana. Maybe what you could do is in presentation mode, there's down there one, but we see it perfectly.
Okay, maybe like this. Do you see it well?
Yes.
Okay, that's as good as it gets. So let's hope this works. So thanks a lot, and very warm welcome to everyone to this seminar. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm here together with my colleagues from the European Commission. We have a joint presentation, and I will start with my part, which relates to the EU Space Act. which is a groundbreaking proposal from the European Commission that was presented on the 25th of June. But before we get to the proposal itself, let me tell you a little bit about the background for this presentation, for this proposal, why we are actually proposing it, why this is important. So we need such a regulation because outer space is clearly more and more congested and contested. Congested because with the increasing number of satellites in space and the risk of collisions and hazards in space, these are growing exponentially. So if you look at this slide, you can see that from the rise of the space age with the first Sputnik launch in 1957, there were around, almost 7,000 satellite launches, which brought more than 20,000 satellites to space, out of which approximately 12,000 are still functioning today. The space launches and explorations used to be exclusively a domain of national agencies and national interests. However, around 20 years ago, this has changed because we are now in the new modern era of space industry. Clearly, new space is taking over. We can see that with private companies that are interested in space exploration and also doing commercialization of space. So that was quite.
Sorry, Susanna, the presentation is not moving. You need to. I don't know. Are you still on the first slide?
I'm on the first slide.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I don't know
Okay.
if I'm still
Okay.
there explaining.
Okay. Perfect.
So
Okay.
yeah, so indeed, private companies came into the game of space business, and they are developing new technologies with the focus of reducing costs and increasing efficiency. The best example for this is the reusable launchers. So we see and we estimate that in the future there will be 50,000 new satellites coming in 10 years, and which are in potential collision with currently around 140 million pieces of small debris. So there we see that there is a high risk that with the number of satellites that will increase and the number of debris that is already there and that will be there in addition, there is a high risk of collision. So we need to tackle that risk. And on the other hand, we also see that space is congested and contested. So contested means that there are threats that are also increasing, both cyber and physical risks. So we see also these risks as very important, and we need to address them. So now I'm checking to the next slide. So we are. What is the background for our proposal? There has been call for actions in various documents of the European Commission, but also in independent reports. We can see that clearly in Draghi and Letta reports, there were references for a need to create a single market for space in the competitiveness compass, and also the proposal then was included in the Commission Work Programme 2025. Before that, we also, together with the European External Action Service, had two major communications. One was on the EU approach for space traffic management, and another one for the EU space strategy for security and defense, both calling for clarity in the rules with regards to safety, sustainability, and resilience of space. So therefore, let me see, yeah. There is a problem for some reason. I'm sorry, there is a problem with this. Yeah, okay, so now it works. So sorry about that. So therefore, we, as the European Commission, we post the EU Space Act. The purpose of the Space Act is to establish a functional internal market for space services and space data. They have two objectives in mind. The first one is to increase competitiveness. Why is it so? Because currently we see that there is a
sorry, Susanna. Sorry, it's Margarita from NEREUS. We cannot see the slides. Are you changing any slides? We still see the first one.
Oh la 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 la.
Otherwise, I can share from my side your presentation.
If you could be so kind, because there is some kind of a technical hiccup on my side, and I'm sorry that if it doesn't work.
Yes, and then you just let me know when I have to move on with the slides.
Please do that. I'm really sorry for the participants. I stopped sharing.
No, it's okay. Since we track the problem, so share.
Really apologize. This is
So I'm
exactly the
sharing.
that I wanted to avoid, that we don't run into this. I'm sorry about this. So yes,
So I'm
we were
sharing now your
on slide 5.
slides.
So we are on slide 5 right now.
Yeah, just give me a moment to. Here?
Yes, this next one. Yes, here we go. So it's an important slide. So it actually explains what the Space Act is all about. So that and I'm sorry for the glitch. So as I was saying, two objectives. One is to increase the competitiveness. So they're clearly of our companies, we see a fragmentation in the existing national legislations in Europe. So we have different national laws and different national requirements for authorization of space activities. So we see that there is a need to find a way to have a common rules in Europe that would create a common predictable business environment for our companies in Europe. And our aim is not to penalize our companies, European companies, by creating stricter rules for us in Europe than elsewhere. Therefore, the law would also apply to all operators that provide their services in the single market. So that's why we are aiming for the level playing field for all operators. The law will also take into account smaller players, so that's why we have created a so-called light regime, which reflects the policy imperative to ensure that any regulatory initiative remains proportionate to the size of the companies. So that's the competitiveness part. And then on the other hand, our objective is to ensure the protection of our space assets. So this is our objective, because why is it so? Because space is interconnected, and a risk to one satellite poses a risk to all. So therefore, we want to have this single requirements for safety, resilience, and environmental sustainability, to have common rules for everyone. And next slide, please. This proposal is based on numerous consultations. So as I said, the Commission tabled the proposal in 2025, but the work before over 3 years, we have a number of more than 300 targeted stakeholder consultations with key companies. We had bilateral meetings with EU member states, workshops with EU member states, and also we involved space industry associations. And we see that there was a broad support for development of a common legal framework for space activities. This was the result. So we have we had support from the key stakeholder groups before we proposed our EU Space Act. Next slide, please. Coming to the Space Act itself, just to say, because many of you probably had a look at it, and it's quite a heavy document. It's 119 articles of text. Just to break it down for you a little bit, we can talk about two main spheres or topics in this proposal. The one are the horizontal aspects, in which we are talking about the general provision, the authorizations, the governance, the equivalent supporting measures, and then the technical part, the technical requirements. Next slide, please. Let me explain the scope of this act, because this is very important in order to understand what are we talking about. So here, the scope of the EU Space Act is that as I said, we are creating or establishing a functioning single market in space services and space data that are generated through use and operation of space infrastructure. So as you see on the slide, we are at this last, let's say, the product that comes to the EU space market. So this is what we are regulating there. The EU Space Act will apply to space operators and space data providers from EU and as well as third countries, as I mentioned. It only applies to commercial and civilian satellites that are from on EU level or on member states. That's it, to international organization and also third countries. Next slide, please. What is excluded from the scope? There are 4 big exclusions. So first of all, we don't touch on anything that is a national prerogative with regard to defense and national security. There, all the military satellites are out of the scope. We also don't touch those military assets that are temporarily placed under military control. So this is also not, we don't touch upon this. Thirdly, we don't regulate or touch upon the authorization and management of the radio frequency spectrum. And fourthly, we are not talking about assets that are there already today. These assets, we are talking about satellites that are going to be launched after 2030. So everything which is done now, these satellites, of course, can be launched as is. But the good thing is that we can already start preparing for those requirements that will come in the future. Next slide, please. When it comes to governance, so the governance is a streamlined and a non-discriminatory process. As I said, we are talking about the assets of member states. Here, we are not touching the status quo. The national governance system as will stay untouched. We are not imposing new bodies. The member states that already have established national scheme will keep that scheme, and there is nothing in addition. If they wish, they can use technical bodies of their choice to help them in this process. When it comes to the EU own assets, there it will be the Commission that will adopt decision over authorizations for these satellites, and we will be supported by the technical assessment of the EU Space Program Agency. With regard to the third countries, there again the EU Space Agency will be doing technical assessments, or we also foresee a process of equivalence or international agreements with this. And finally, with international organizations, we need to have a international agreement with these organizations to see how the details of this law will apply. And there I would like to underline it is very important for us to work with the European Space Agency. European Space Agency is a trusted partner of the European Commission in this process. We recognize the wealth and really the experience of the European Space Agency in this, and we will have a special agreement with the European Space Agency to cover aspects that are related to their work. Next slide, please. Finally, we get to what is let's say the technical part of this proposal. So we are proposing, as I said, a common set of requirements revolving around three pillars: safety, resilience, environmental sustainability. So first of all, when it comes to safety, we are proposing rules on space debris mitigation, collision avoidance, orbital traffic rules to ensure the safety of the launchers of the satellites. Secondly, we propose rules for cybersecurity risk management through life cycle of space missions, and rules for reporting incidents, building already on the existing NIS2 and CERT directive to ensure resilience of our space infrastructure. And thirdly, we will propose a methodology to calculate the environmental footprint of the space activities to promote more responsible and sustainable space activities. What is important to say is that these requirements are state-of-the-art requirements and are technologically neutral. We work with the industry to make sure that these requirements are operational and that they do not cause you burden or administrative or budgetary risk. Finally, my last slide, supportive measures. In order to be able to help the industry and the member states to, you can switch the slide, please. In order to be able to help the industry and the member states to adapt to these new requirements, we have proposed a number of supportive measures in this act, which relate to small companies, mid-caps, and SMEs. I am not going to go into the details. You see it here. We definitely understand that in order to be able to have compliance with this regulation, we need to support the key actors in the processes, and hence we are there to propose there are a number of measures proposed to do so. So for my final message with regard to the EU Space Act, what do we need to remember about this is that, first of all, we are addressing emerging risk related to congested and contested orbits and the rise of space threats. That's the first message. Second, big and small players need a sustainable, predictable environment secured by the development of the single markets. Therefore, addressing current and future legal fragmentation is essential to support the competitive industry. And the third very important message is that if there are no EU rules, then these will be imposed to our industry by non-European players. And therefore, it's important for us that we are there and creating the rules and not just following the rules of others. Thank you very much. This is everything from my side, and I give the floor to my colleague Giancarlo, who will walk you through the vision.
Shall I keep the presentation?
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Susanna. And we look forward. Margarita, please ask your question. Sorry.
No, for Susanna. Shall I keep the presentation open for your colleague, or it's...
Yes, please. It's the same presentation.
The same presentation. Okay, sorry.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You should have the next slide about the vision.
Yeah. One moment. You can still see the slide?
Not yet.
No.
Okay. Now I will open.
In the meantime, and maybe just start with the context. And so, indeed.
Now?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me go to the next. Yes. So, thank you very much. So indeed, Susanna presented the proposal for the Space Act, which was adopted in a package, so-called Space Package last June. The other part of the package was a vision for the European space economy. Maybe an important piece of information is, of course, while the Space Act is a legal proposal, the vision for a European space economy is a communication. So it doesn't have any binding character, but it gives, if you want, the broader context and a high-level objective for the EU activities in space and the space economy. So if you go to the next slide, please. First of all, what is the space economy in the sense of this communication? Of course, very, very different definitions, but the Commission decided to define the space economy as all economic activities on Earth and in space, which are enabled by space-related technologies, services, and infrastructure. It's a very broad definition. You see here a kind of a graphic representation of it. It includes, of course, all you have infrastructure, you have flying in space, in Earth orbit, lunar orbit, you have the in-space operation and services, but you also have, and very importantly, what is on the ground, be it manufacturing, infrastructure, and the service. So it is, by choice, a very broad definition, and this broad definition is linked to some assumptions that we see in the next slide, which are the economic assumptions of the current state of the space economy and of the foreseen growth. These are assumptions which are present in the Draghi report as well, so the Commission took those as a reference. Basically, the message is the space economy is expected to boom. It's already thriving, but it's really expected to boom in the next decade. Estimated by 2030, it is expected to grow ninefold. And here the message is clearly, there is a big opportunity here that Europe cannot miss. So the report of the Commission reviews, the 21st century will be the century of space. We like to say, repeat it very often. So because it is the century of space, we need to be at the forefront as Europeans. Next slide, please. So what are the objectives of the space economy communication? Let's say the level of ambition, which is posed there, is very high. So we want to be the leader as a continent, as a leader in the global space economy by 2050. We start from a rather good place. We have the competences, we have the industrial capacity, we have the skills. But we don't necessarily have yet the way that we could have on a global scale, and clearly there are some opportunities which are untapped. And here are just some key figures, which are, if I remember correctly, come from the ESA report. If you look at the global upstream market value, Europeans, the industry has about 6% of the global market. it is a much better percentage if you look at the non-captive market. Still, you can assess it. Is it good or is it an opportunity to grow further? When you look at the downstream market, we have about a fifth of the global market. When you look at the graph on the right, clearly there is a growth that is on the European side, largely. That's a bit where this communication to the ambition of the future. Next slide, please. The communication structures, puts forward six building blocks, and I'll go through all of them because I think it's better to leave time for question and answers at the end. But if you look at the one on the single market for space, that's clearly where you have the link to the Space Act. Right? That's one of the important gaps we want to fill. Creation as perfect as possible single market space, which we don't have yet. You've seen the other, which span many parts of the space economy. And in the next slide, we see other messages, the communications. The first, the 6 building blocks, where the Commission has identified the key challenges that we have to address. But it doesn't stop there. The communication also puts forward some actions. In total, there are more than 40 actions. And the second set is about strengthening the upstream and the downstream. I think I mentioned it actually in these economic projections. Most of the growth will come from downstream, but it's clear that you can not only focus on downstream, you also need the upstream part. So the communication clearly spans the whole spectrum. For this part, we will just put one quote from the competitiveness compass, because it's true that already today, the entire economic sector depends on the resilience of the space sector. So it's very important that we keep working on that. And the third and last block is the in-space economy. There, I think the communication really breaks the big new ground for an official document. Because it spans not only the in-space operation and services, actually the removal, extension of the lifespan of satellites and so on and so forth, but also we look at the extension of activities beyond the Earth orbit, exploration, even mining and resource utilization. That's a bit new for European Commission document, and it linked again to the narrative of our commissioner, who says the space is the new frontier. And we have to be there. We have to be there also in this rather future-looking activities in space, which have been so far maybe a bit left more to the European Space Agency and the Union get engaged in the part of that. Next slide, please. So, of course, we want to have this vision translated into reality. So it's not enough to adopt a commission document to do that. And there are 40 plus actions, and some of them, which are in the last part of the communication, are I think particularly relevant. One is, of course, to measure. If we want to be a leader, we want to tap into the growth, we have to measure all these parameters. So the Commission will develop a dedicated methodology to monitor both the competitiveness and the new share of the global space economy. The second is related to the fragmentation, which is also a very recurrent theme. We have a fragmented landscape for space in the European Union and also the government. So the communication says that the Commission will establish a Space Team Europe. And the Space Team Europe must be high level, so we see it as chaired by the Commissioner. And it will bring together all European space stakeholders, say that you spout member states, industry, research organizations, and so on. And it will have to prepare, among other things, a new space master plan, really the roadmap to make these visions happen and become reality. And finally, exactly to embed this in our existing mechanism coordination, the communication also said that space will be one of the selected key areas of strategic importance in the framework of the EU competitiveness coordination tool, which is again a competitiveness compass, and it really aims at addressing again this fragmentation and aligning the activities at the different levels, member state level, even regional level, and so this is what the communication proposes, and we will, of course, we are working to implement it again, not a binding effect directly on companies or administrations like the Space Act, but a number of changes that are coming. Thank you very much, and I think now Maria will continue the presentation.
Hello. If you can move to the following slide, I will briefly present the European Competitiveness Fund. Can you hear me well?
Yes, much better than your colleague.
Okay. In July, the Commission presented its proposal for a European Competitiveness Fund. And the difference, let's say, with the current structure of the so now, as you know, we have the space program regulation that covers the funding activities of the EU for space activities and for the space infrastructure during this multi-annual financial framework, so covering until 2027. However, for the following, there's echo now, I think. For the following multi-annual financial framework, the Commission has decided to break a bit with the classical structure of having lots of different programs for the different sectors, and to create a big fund, which is like a fund of funds, if you want, which is this competitiveness fund, where basically the gist of the funds that are key, that are considered to be key for the competitiveness of the EU, are put together, so that basically the all the financial instruments, the financial toolbox that are available to boost these sectors can apply in a more flexible manner to these sectors. And so this competitiveness fund includes a number of windows, a number of policy windows, one being the resilience window, where you find defense and you find also space. Maybe going to the next slide. So here you can see the difference, let's say, between the current status, where we have the space program regulation, and the future one with the competitiveness fund. So at the moment, it's true that every fund is quite siloed from the others. So we would be passing from a limited coordinated strategic focus to a focus rather on a set of commonly agreed strategic priorities. And then we ensure predictability, but at the same time, we increase the flexibility to adapt to new emerging priorities. Basically, the Commission realized that during this current multi-annual financial framework, it didn't have the flexibility that it needed to face crises that were completely unexpected, like the COVID, the pandemic, and then the crisis resulting from the Russian aggression against Ukraine. And so it saw that its policy actions from a funding perspective were rather limited. So the idea is to bring in more flexibility with the competitiveness fund so that the Commission is more ready, if you want, to face unexpected situations in the future. Now, in terms of mobilizing private capital, the potential is quite limited. And with the competitiveness fund, as I said, we try to mobilize the full financial toolbox, from grants and loans to equity and procurement. And also we try to improve access to funding for the scaling up of companies and projects. And also the whole rationale behind the competitiveness fund is really to cover the whole investment journey. So really from research to, I would say, deployment, which is now missing. Now you have all these different instruments, and each instrument covers a different moment, if you want, of the investment journey. With the competitiveness fund, we put everything together. So the idea is really to accompany projects along the entire investment journey, and to support the entire value chains, really from the critical raw materials until the final products. Next slide, please. So a little bit on the structure of the competitiveness fund. As I was saying, it is structured in different policy windows. You can see there's our window for space, which is a resilience window. Then you have a window covering clean transition and industrial decarbonization. You have another one, health, biotech, agriculture, and bioeconomy, and then you have another one on digital leadership. So these are really the areas that are considered key for to be boosted, let's say, in order to increase the competitiveness of the EU. And then you see the different financial envelopes that are assigned to the different policy windows. And so our window, if you want, where you find space, is allocated in this proposal. But again, this is the Commission wish. Then we'll have to see what the final amount will be as a result of the legislative process. So here the financial envelope is of 125 billion euros if you detract the part allocated to research, which stays in the traditional instrument of Horizon Europe. So the total, including the funding allocated to research, would be of 131 billion euros. And then covering the whole spectrum of policy windows, we have the InvestEU instrument, which is really there to apply to all of them with a financial envelope of 11 billion euros. And so within this resilience window, you have the support for defense industry policy, space systems and space policy implementation, support for security industrial policy, and then support for resilience policy. So the two last ones basically cover what is now civil security, handled by the Directorate General for Home Affairs in the Commission, and then resilience is rather the critical raw materials support that is covered through Horizon Europe currently. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the specific part of space within the resilience window, what we propose is a rather evolutionary approach in relation to what we have now in the Space Program Regulation. So of course, we continue and we enhance the existing space components. So of course, we have positioning, navigation, and timing. There's a microphone is open somewhere. So we have the four classical components, the existing ones, with PNT, with Earth observation, with secure connectivity, where we bring together IRIS², which, as you know, is part of a different regulation, and GovSatcom, and then space situational awareness. And so it's not just continuity, it's also an enhancing, an enhancement and an evolution, because for position, navigation, and timing, we not only have now Galileo and EGNOS, but we also include LEO PNT. And for Earth observation, we don't only have Copernicus, but we also include the Governmental Service of Earth Observation, which is under development. And then on top of the 4 classical components, we propose to introduce 3 new components. So one is space commercialization and space economy. So if you want, this is an upgrade of the current Cassini initiative, which, as you know, was developed based on Horizon Europe, and which is an initiative of great success. So now, if you want, because of the success that it has received, because of the usefulness that it has really to boost the space economy, and because we want to keep on boosting Cassini, it goes explicitly into our proposal for a competitiveness fund as a component of its own. Then you have technological sovereignty, research, and innovation, because of course, especially with the current geopolitical situation, we need to increase our non-dependence on critical space technologies. So we need to do this also through key funding in the Competitiveness Fund. And then last but not least, we have a new component of access to space, which, if you want, is already covered in the current space program regulation in Article 5. But because of the political priority that it has gained, because of the increase of demand, because of the need to boost competition and competitiveness in this market, because it becomes also a component of its own with 3 main axes: the need to aggregate demand, they need to, so innovation, sorry, which is missing there, they need to keep on working on innovation and access to space, and then the upgrade on ground systems and infrastructures. I think we have a last slide. Yes. So in terms of governance and rules, the Competitiveness Fund is not changing anything. I know that the text is somehow complex to understand, and it might give maybe the wrong impression, but the governance doesn't change. Of course, you know that we have a very complex governance in the EU space ecosystem, and the Commission cannot deliver on its own in terms of managing the space program. It relies heavily on USPA and it relies heavily on ESA. So this doesn't change. And then we have additional articles, additional provisions in the Competitiveness Fund in terms of that cover the eligibility and the participation of beneficiaries, that covers the procurement, that cover the grants, and also their rules do not change. They stay the same. We will still have certain eligibility conditions that apply to procurements and to grants that are considered security sensitive for the EU. So I think that would be it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Many thanks to all 3 Commission speakers to give a broad and concise overview. I think now we can open a session of question and answer. And I received one question by Carol Urlings from SME for Space. She asked, is there more information available on what this light regime would entail? I think this was a question to Susanna's presentation. It was quite in the beginning.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for the question. So yes, indeed. So the light regime, let me explain to you. So there, what we, as I said, what we try to do is to have proportional measures to smaller companies and research institutions. So just to give you an example, a light regime, one of the things that we think about in the area of safety, that research and educational satellites that are launched into an orbit which is below 600 kilometers would be exempted from the requirement on the spacecraft maneuverability. This is, for example, one of the things that we consider as a light regime. Or another one with regard to resilience. There, for smaller companies, we propose a simplified regime for risk management that would apply for them. But of course, these are the examples that we can give.
Thank you. And Andreas Lenz from Heuking, he is one of the stakeholder speakers later. Andreas, you already started to respond. Would you like to complement Susanna's response?
No, there is nothing to complement. That's
Okay.
all which is to said. It's Article 10, and then it's explained what it entails.
Perfect. We can move on to the next question. Ray Fieldman, a law firm based in Paris, asked, what is the reaction of third countries like China, India, US, UK, and so on?
Okay, so when it comes to third countries, we are still in the very early days because, of course, this proposal has been just presented in June. What I can say for sure is what is important for us is to ensure that we have a very good cooperation, transatlantic cooperations with our partners in the US. So in this sense, a couple of weeks ago, we had a EU-US space dialogue, which took place in Washington. It was a very important meeting between the European Commission, European Union representatives and the representatives from the US government. And during this meeting, there was also a roundtable with US companies and businesses exactly on the topic of the EU Space Act. What does it mean for them? What does it bring? And the exchanges were very good. And what we are looking into and what the US partners has asked us that they would like to look into the possibility of seeing whether an equivalence regime could be set up. So this is a very positive development, and we see that as a very good step in a good direction. With regard to the other countries, there we had no particular exchanges so far.
Okay. Next question from Emmanuel Mondon. It's a question to Giancarlo. Space economy or real economy supported by space?
Yes, so first of all, apologies. I understand my audio is bad. Sorry, I'm connecting from USPA and I was unable to connect to the room system. So this is just my laptop. Yeah, apologies for that. It is both. It is the space economy stricto sensu, so the space industry, and the real economy, so out of this real space sector, which is supported by space. So I think the first slide gave the overview of what is defined by this communication as space economy. It clearly includes both. And that's also why, you know, the economic projections are rather optimistic maybe, or impressive in terms of growth.
Thank you. Then we have a question if the slides can be shared with the participants after the presentation. I think we agreed in our preparatory talk. It would be nice if the three commission speakers could send us a short note that we can share them with the participants. Then we will publish and share. A question by Filippo Murana. What is the approach regarding dual-use technologies? Are there any plans or initiatives to support companies interested in entering the space market in adapting or reconverting their existing technologies, for instance, those from the automotive sector?
Maybe I can take this one as a start at least, just because I'm here because of the Cassini Entrepreneurship Days in Prague yesterday and the day before. And it was for the first time in conjunction with EUDIS, the EU Defense Innovation. So it was really addressing dual-use companies in particular. So we are working on that. Okay, the reconversion of, for instance, the automotive sector is clearly a bit more specific, but there is support for companies in dual use. And for the automotive, I think what could be relevant is what you will find as one of the actions in the communication which is in future to have a Cassini manufacturing accelerator. So we know that sometimes the companies need support in scaling up their manufacturing capacity. So this could include not just new facilities, new manufacturing facilities, but it could also include reconversion of existing ones, for example, for automotive.
Thank you. Then we have another one from Emmanuel Mondon. Regarding space economy, CSECO monthly networking meeting held on 2nd October with Emma Gatti presentation titled Rethinking the Size of the Space Economy. Are satellite-enabled service inflating the industry's true value? A comment. Okay. Then we have Bernhard Weiss. What are the current thoughts and ambitions towards circular economy in space?
I don't know if this is more for, it's partially for Susanna in the sense that, of course, there is a sustainability aspect of space act. I see there is a second part of the question, just reading. Are there enforceable KPIs? Okay, I think that's
is
more.
it intended to include hard and enforceable KPI, for instance, for reuse of space hardware?
Yeah. So this maybe is more Space Act related, but let me just give an example. I mean, yesterday there were a lot of startups here in Prague presenting their services. It's amazing what they do, including for circular economy. One example which really I found striking, a startup with preparing a laser system. So they would dock on a satellite and with a laser, by destroying a piece of debris, use the thrust to move the satellite in the desired place without fuel. So I must say, what is not missing is the creativity of our space industry. But for the KPIs, etc., maybe I leave it to Susanna.
Well, we don't address KPIs as such in the regulation. As I said, I mean, for the environmental sustainability, what we do is that we will propose a methodology for calculating the environmental footprint of the space activities, and this methodology is not there yet. So this is something that is coming.
Thank you. I move on now to the question of João Serra from European Space Policy Institute, so that we have also from different participant questions. Then if we have time, I can go back. That's not only question from one participant. João asks, does the space program have a ring-fenced budget like the current MFF? Currently, it is mixed with other things, resilience, security, defense. And his second question is Horizon Europe under the European competitive funds? And how will the synergies between national plans, the Horizon Europe, and the European Competition Fund actually play out? Thirdly, will the European Competition Fund adopt an approach similar to the RRF? And his fourth question, if the new own resources negotiation fail, is the European Competition Fund going to suffer the largest?
Thank you. I will take those questions. So on the budget, we don't know how the budget, how the 125 billion euros assigned to the resilience window will be distributed among the different priorities that are within that resilience window. I think first we need to know within the legislative process what will be the final amount that we get for that window as a result of negotiations with the Parliament and with the Council. I know this is something that worries partially the sector, but I mean, we believe that the financial envelope that it is foreseen by the Commission, that the Commission has put forward, will be sufficiently enough to not only continue financing the EU space infrastructure, but also to fund its evolution, the new services, the new components, and also to be able to face unexpected needs. And the same goes for defense needs within that window. Now, I think there was another question about relationship with the Horizon Europe. This is also quite recurrent. Basically, even if the Horizon Europe program has a regulation of its own, a standalone regulation, in practice, in the work programs that we will prepare, like we do now, we will have there the research part that is funded by Horizon Europe, if you want. So even though Horizon Europe is in a way an exception to the idea of putting all these funds together within the same legislative instrument, in practice, when it comes to the implementation of the fund, we will be covering the entire investment journey, because the work programs will really cover from research to manufacturing and deployment. And so if you add the amount that is assigned to Horizon Europe, you come up with a total financial envelope of 131 billion euros. There was another question about the relationship with the RRF, I think. No, it won't work in the same way. That's a different kind of instrument that was developed because of the various specific circumstances that took place as a result of the pandemic and the need to fuel the EU economy. This is it. I mean, this is really the classical way of doing policy through funding in the EU. It's just that this comes together in a single instrument, offering more flexibility and also offering the possibility of using the entire financial toolbox of the EU at the disposal of the sectors that have been selected to join, if you want, this fund of funds. I don't know if there was something else that I forgot to address.
I think you addressed a lot, and I think maybe first participants need to digest. If something is not clear, you can still write open questions in the chat. We are monitoring, we can come back. Then I go back, and there is another question from Bernard Weiss. What is the short-term vision of a European space economy on the micro and meso level? How should needed technologies, products and services be supported, better incentivized in order to be more sustainable and include circularity-based strategies? Thinking about funding for foundational technology like functional defunct satellite capturing, upgrading or maneuvering, and robotic manipulation in space.
Maybe I will take that one. I would say the vision in the sense of the communication is not short term. So you will not find there an action plan with, okay, what do we do in 25, in 26? We would work on the implementation, but it's not, there is nothing new short term. It is, or there is all the activities on which we are working already. So all our policies on circular economy and so on. Specifically for space, what we have, I think, related to the areas mentioned is the ISOs for pilot. which I'm sure Susanna want to say something more, but I mean that's the main activities we have at the moment for in-space operations and services. It is a pilot, but with an ambition to really be the basis for something more long-term. And as I just told you, I made one example. There is a lot going on with the financial support more broadly on space, like the one from Cassini, the European Investment Fund, to invest in companies. There is a lot of activities there, which really brings solutions to the market for more sustainability, and also sometimes joining with the space, security space, removing the debris and so on and so forth.
Yes, if you allow me to step in a little bit on this, so in-space operations and services is another area in which my team is in charge of. So yes, indeed, we are working on a pilot mission for in-space operations and services. For those of you that are interested in this, we are organizing together with the German government a strategic ISOS forum in December, on the 16th and 17th of December in Munich. So I would warmly welcome you to come to this event, and there we'll provide the areas and more information on what we are doing and what's happening in this area.
Okay, thank you to all three Commission speakers for their comprehensive responses and giving us an in-depth insight into the proposal. We continue to collect, and we'll let you have the question of the participants and share them afterwards. We need, however, now in the program to move on and give the stakeholder community the floor. The Commission has reopened the consultation on the EU space package, and stakeholder can give feedback to the Commission via an online consultation. We will copy you the link in the chat. And now we like to have a little bit an exchange with the stakeholder community on their views on the proposal, on the EU space package. And I'm very pleased to give the floor to Albert Royo from the Data Secretariat based in Catalonia. Albert, you are responsible for the data initiative, and before the Commission published its proposal, you sent together with Emilia Romagna and the Azores an open letter. You published an open letter highlighting the regional perspective on the idea of a European space law. Could you maybe share your views? Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for having us today. Let me introduce myself. My name is Albert Royo. I'm the responsible for the Secretariat of the so-called Disruptive and Emerging Technology Alliance, DITA, which is a network of regional governments from around the world representing some of the main tech hubs that decided basically to join forces a couple of years ago to harness the might of emerging technologies in order to improve public policies. So we are basically focused on space, quantum, and AI-based technologies. We are, I would say, a unique global initiative that currently gathers 19 regional governments representing more than 130 million citizens from Occitanie, Bavaria, Flanders, or Scotland in Europe, to Massachusetts, Quebec, and Buenos Aires in the Americas, to Gyeonggi, Kyoto, or South Australia in the Asia-Pacific region. So it's in this context and ahead of the Commission Space Act proposal that we promoted an open letter jointly signed by 3 DITA European members entitled "Regions Can Help the EU Space Act Take Off." I have put the link to that open letter in the chat together with the link to our website. So basically, the letter underscores the role that regions, the administrations closest to citizens, businesses, and innovation ecosystems, can play and are actually playing in developing space sector in Europe. It was signed by the Vice President of the government of Emilia-Romagna, the Vice President of the government of the Azores, and the Minister for Business and Labor of the government of Catalonia, and it was published by Agence Europe on May 15. So that text basically sets out our position on what the first EU Space Act should look like. So no, are we satisfied with the proposal which was tabled by the Commission at the end of June? Well, we think that there are quite a lot of positive elements reflected in the Commission's proposal. Just to mention 3 of them: the integration of downstream services. Our position highlighted the need to promote downstream services, Galileo, EGNOS, Copernicus, IRIS², and their application across sectors like agriculture, fisheries, land management, transport, environment, disaster management, or energy. And the draft regulation acknowledges the importance of downstream services by requiring operators to integrate risk management, environmental footprint assessment, and cybersecurity rules along the entire value chain. So this indirectly supports downstream adoption and reliability. That's why we think it's positive. Second, support for innovation startups. Our open letter stressed that startups are key to accelerating innovation and ensuring Europe's technology sovereignty. And the Commission proposal introduces supporting measures, capacity building, guidance, funding facilitation, specifically to help SMEs and new players comply, in line with what was our recommendation. And third, trust, quality, and reliability of space data. We argue for a framework that boosts the integrity and quality of space data to ensure trust in administrative and citizen-facing users. And the draft regulation addresses this through mandatory environmental footprint declarations, oversight by qualified technical bodies, and a union space label to incentivize operators that go beyond minimum compliance. And then fourth, and here we have some mixed feelings, the role of regional governments. While not explicitly mentioned as actors in the governance framework, the regulation's emphasis on market uptake, resilience, and public sector integration reflects awareness of the user side, which is often mediated by regional and local administrations. But when it comes to the formal role of these regional and local governments, our position insists that regional and local administrations, being closest to ecosystems, companies, and citizens, can play a vital role in developing Europe's space ecosystem and should be involved. The Commission's proposal limits governance to member states, the Commission, EUSPA, and technical bodies. There is no explicit recognition of regions, of regional or local authorities in that text. So in this sense, we'd like to be part of the so-called Space Team Europe, which is foreseen in the document Vision for a European Space Economy. Second element, which is not fully reflected from our point of view, we recommended in the text establishing an EU space data set to certify and validate space data for administrative and citizen use, for example, for taxation purposes or subsidies control. The draft regulation, as far as we're concerned, does not include such a data set or centralized validation mechanism, and we think it may impact on the real possibilities to further develop the space sector. Third, the proactive market uptake policies. Our position called for public policies to streamline adoption of satellite services across administrations. And while the proposal sets technical obligations, it lacks a clear policy mandate for stimulating systematic adoption of space-based services by public administrations. And fourth, final user orientation and transparency. We stress that the EU national and regional initiative should be accessible transparently according to user needs. And the draft regulation remains highly supply-side and operator-focused, with little attention to the end-user experience or service integration pathways. So, in a nutshell, and to conclude, the Commission's draft is a good proposal that integrates many of our concerns regarding innovation support, downstream services, trust and quality, but leaves aside crucial elements such as an explicit role for regional governments, the establishment of an EU space dataset, clear policy tools for market uptakes, and a stronger emphasis on final user needs. So we'll keep on working to improve the text to the next steps of the legislative process. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Albert, for highlighting the regional perspective. I'd like now to move on to the European Space Agency. We have with us Gisela Süß, head of the ESA Legal Department Services. Gisela, you work closely with the European Commission. You implement the space programs. What's your perspective on the proposal?
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, thank you first for this invitation and this very interesting meeting, and also to the opportunity to provide our, let's say, our first view on this draft Space Act, which is a very important initiative for the European space environment. So first of all, I would like to underline that ESA fully shares the objectives of this Space Act to render the space environment safer, more sustainable, more resilient. What Susanna said in this context is really very important, and ESA promotes also these objectives for space in Europe. For example, would like to mention the Zero Debris initiative for ESA. The ESA missions have to comply with ESA's Zero Debris policy. And also we have invited partners to follow this path with the European Charter on Space Debris. Also on the sustainability pillar, ESA has various initiatives. I would like to mention the life cycle assessment activities, which, by the way, we are carrying out in close coordination with the European Commission. And then there is the other goal of the European Space Act, which is strengthening competitivity. It's a very important goal, and I think here all participants know that ESA is also working very much in these directions. The public spending on space, 60% is done by the US and 10% only in Europe. So we really need to do everything to strengthen our European industry. And the European Commission had this in mind when proposing the EU Space Act. I think with the idea that acting is better than reacting. Now ESA is ready to work with the Commission on the European Space Act and its implementation. And as was said by Susanna, we are coordinating each other on this. And we think in particular ESA has to contribute and can contribute in some technical areas. I would like to mention standardization, but also regarding the three technical pillars where ESA has expertise. And also always with a view to ensure that the impact on the industry, and in particular on SMEs and mid-caps, remain proportionate. I think this was also mentioned by Susanna. We share this goal, and we have discussed already on the light regimes, and I think we should work very much in this direction. So notably ESA can play a role, as I already said, in the domain of standardization. ESA is working for decades in this sector in the framework of the ECSS standards. And ESA considers that it's important to build on these standards. Then also ESA has a long experience in the support of member states in the implementation of national space laws, capacity building, helping, supporting the compliance. And there also we think we have something to offer. We welcome and we saw that these domains are mentioned in a very specific article, Article 108, which is on the relationship with the European agency. And last but least, maybe one legal comment on this. ESA is not subject to EU law, so the conditions for implementing this EU Space Act should not be defined in the law, in the Space Act, but in an international agreement, hence Article 108. And ESA is looking forward to a constructive dialogue with the Commission on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I move on to the next speaker, Eurospace, Olivier Lemaitre. Olivier, you represent the European manufacturing industry, the big players. We would like to hear your view on the proposal. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roya. I will start with clarification. I do not represent the big players. We do represent the space manufacturing industry. We do not represent many SMEs, so we have very few ones. But we also have mid-caps, large and small mid-caps. We also have a growing number, by the way, of relatively large startups. So no, we do not represent the large player. I insist on this because there is this idea floating around, and actually we do represent the space manufacturing industry, regardless of their size. Now, regarding I will only comment on the Space Act part of this very large workshop. As I think everybody knows, the EU space industry, the European space industry is supportive of this idea of the EU Space Act. We have been supportive of the work of the Commission for the last years, and in particular because I would say for two main reasons. The first reason, I think, and that's the success of the EU Space Act. It marks an important step toward EU being a space power. I think it's important. The EU is already implementing a number of operational programs. So it's we know the Commission is working on access to space. So it gives itself basically the tools to become a space power. So from a political point of view, it's very important. Then we were also, and we are still also very supportive of the idea of an EU Space Act to address in particular the topic of what we call space traffic management. So basically safety in space. For a number of reasons. The main obvious reason is that it's become more and more complicated to operate freely in space, and it's certainly better to have one regulation at EU level rather than a number of national regulation at national level. Also, in this domain of space safety, there is also, I would say, a particular concrete interest from the space industry that actually the Space Act can actually lead or be a driver for innovation and for the creation of new markets in areas like space situational awareness or even perhaps in space operation and services. So that's positive. Then, of course, I mean it's a very ambitious text. and we obviously have a number of concerns or even criticism. I would say that we are happy to have a very good level of interaction with the services of DG Défi, actually to ease our understanding of the text and to clarify what was not obvious. That being said, I must say that I would say the main criticism that we have regarding this text is that it's really all-encompassing, and we are a bit afraid that the problem might be that it's kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And in particular, there are areas of the text regarding, for instance, environmental sustainability, where we are already trying today to regulate a domain where the methodology to assess the problem are not existing yet. So that's really a concern for industry, and not at all that we are against environmental sustainability rules for the sector. I think it's normal. We are already abiding to a number of environmental rules, such as REACH and so on. So it's not a problem of principle. It's a problem of practical implementation that I think is arriving very early in the process. Then we also have certainly concern regarding the problem of derogation and equivalence decision that we are not reassured, to say it, to put it that way. We are not reassured that it will not grant advantages to non-EU operators and therefore undermining the EU preference principle for which we are fighting since a number of years. Then I think it's not a surprise. We also have concern regarding the administrative burdens that may be very heavy and slow down the time to launch, the time to market, and obviously the time to get revenue for an industry that, and I insist on this, is really struggling to be profitable. And I know this message is a bit complicated. We have a very strong problem of profitability in the sector, which is a bit complicated to assess, while at the same time we hear that the space economy is booming. So it's really complicated. I apologize for a moment. I have a problem with my connection. Sorry.
Maybe in the meantime, I move on because time.
Sorry,
runs.
yes,
Yes.
but I will finish there, Roya. I
Okay.
apologize for this. My modem was done. So thanks.
No problem. Please.
It's fine. I will conclude here.
Yeah, please. Okay. Then I move on. We kind of lost Olivier. Then I move on to the next speaker, Emmanuel Payot. Emmanuel represents EARTH, the European Earth observation companies that develop Earth observation-based services and products. Emmanuel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Roya. It's a pleasure to be part of this session. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, good, perfect. So I'm Emmanuel Pajot. I'm the Secretary General of EARTH, European Association of Remote Sensing Companies, representing what we traditionally say is a downstream part of the Earth observation value chain. I really appreciate, and we really appreciate the effort of the European Commission to really support the uptake of space. These two documents, EU Space Act and Space Visions, are really important milestone, and we really support the objective drawn by the European Commission. As indirectly said in the presentation, the first one on the EU Space Act, EARTH initially didn't really fully support or endorse the Space Act. Yes, not because we were against this, we saw a lot of value, but more for a lack of understanding. And this is what we wanted to raise initially. And the comparison, in fact, with the automotive industry is for me illustrative. and we really don't want our industry to end the same current situation that they are experiencing. We are convinced about the objective of the industry, but other examples, such as, for example, the UDR, show the difference and the gap between the theory and practice. And this is why we had some questions initially on the Space Act. It's really ambitious. The different pillars are clear, but most of the members, in fact, do not consider themselves as directly impacted by the EU Space Act, more on the manufacturing side. But even if we represent the downstream, more and more of the company are currently evolving on the evolution of the value chains, create that you have this new space, which are both on the manufacturing side and the development of services. So we have members for sure, which are currently as well impacted. And they made some comment regarding primarily the administrative burden, as mentioned before by Olivier. For the companies who are reselling data, providing access to data, the definition of primary providers of space-based data was something that was really unclear initially. So some further clarification was still needed at this time.
Emmanuel, can you sum up, because we are running now short of time and we have one more speaker. Thank you.
I will go fast. So just to say that for our industry, so for the EU Space Act, the main question is really still on the additional costs that it will generate. We know the estimation that have been shared in the document. When we discuss our members, they share that the additional cost could be more closer to 20%, for example. So this creates a lot of questions on the percent capability for the company to continue to sell at this cost the solutions, both in the European Union or as well internationally, because we have to develop internationally. So I will jump to the EU vision. We really appreciate.
Please, Emmanuel, come to the end, because I will have one more speaker.
Okay. Really appreciate the vision. We think that it's a really powerful way to go. There is a lot of question again still on how it will be implemented. The point I want to insist is that you mentioned, for example, the fragmentation of the industry. Fragmentation as well has been initiated because of the tools which were implemented. Cassini is great to support innovation, but it has to evolve in order to strengthen the SMEs, which already have solutions, operational capability to develop in the market, but they need to have support. These are the ones which currently are struggling, and we see in the EU vision a really interesting way to go. We see as well the DPS extension to the services as a potential way to support the central purchasing body that are mentioned. So I'm glad to see this moving forward.
Thank you. I move on to the next speakers. Andreas Lenz from the law firm Heuking. You are a law firm specialized on space law and had an in-depth look into the proposal. Please, Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We indeed have, and because the time is so tight, I put the final recommendations we obtained from the stakeholders we spoke with into the chat, because I think, well, we are 1 minute over time. What we did is, in our work, we jointly with friends and colleagues from France, from Portugal, Spain, and Norway, we, in our discussions with our clients and stakeholders of the space economy, of course, we touched upon the EU Space Act and the view of these stakeholders. And the terms which came up the most were, of course, the complexity, the proportionality, and the question of support. We have put into the chat some of the recommendations we obtained from these stakeholders. And so I will only briefly touch upon that. Complexity, as lawyers, we know that's much easier said than done to make it less complex if the matter is complex. However, what strikes us is that something like the ESO on the debris avoidance is not really touched upon in the EU Space Act, and some stakeholders feel that the Space Act is trying to rewrite things which are already there as a kind of standard, also jointly developed with the European Space Agency. And maybe there is a way to reduce complexity when we look for certain things on the ISO standards. Then it was also touched the SMEs. When we look at that, only the small ones, not the mid-sized ones, are exempted, and only for certain things in the light regimes. There is a certain feeling that the problems would also arise for one step bigger companies. I know that SMEs at all cover about more than 95% of all the companies in Europe, but there may be a reason in the space industry to look at the SMEs as one group and maybe think about that, think about to have those companies for certain parts of the EU Space Act are in a kind of soft law and guidance sector where they get certain goodies under the EU Space label when they go the extra mile, but to not only spare the very small companies, but also the Ms and the SMEs from some of the requirements. I don't know whether that can work for resilience requirements. Then proportionality, a strict mission risk adjusted application of safety and space sustainability requirements was often mentioned in our discussions. And then what I think is missing is exemptions and regulatory sandbox regimes for innovation matters. We have for third country launch providers, we have the derogation and exemption procedures. But my question is, why can't we have something like that, not only for launchers and not only for third country, but for innovation matters? Because there is a big field between research and education institutions and small companies. There may be the matter of innovation and testing and developing certain technology. I think that is not covered as good as it could be from the viewpoint of certain stakeholders. So maybe something like the light regimes with a larger scope for innovation, but also the supply chain. We have last week discussed from the perspective of export control with the client. He has built in material parts from the US, but how could that work if we have a big platform which is a space object and there are a lot of stuff in it which comes from outside of the EU? I'm not totally convinced that we will be able from the beginning to convince the suppliers to also to adjust to the EU Space Act. So I think that could be also something apart from innovation, supply chain needs, which could be part of the lighter regimes or even part of the exemptions. And a question, and that's my last point, which we were asked a lot of times, is what is meant by support, both under the EU Space Act and the Vision for Europe? Of course, the legislative process is not finished, but they ask what kind of measures are foreseen because of the financial burdens which are coming with complying with the EU Space Act. I think the expectation of a lot of the small companies and the startups is that this will be covered somehow and not just by certain parts of it. So the question is, what will be the support in what does it really entail under the Vision and under the EU Space Act? And of course, that were only the critical parts. So that's only because the time is so tight. Otherwise, I would have applauded to many parts of the EU Space Act too.
Thank you, Andreas. We heard a lot. I think most of you will need to digest. Susanna, we really appreciate your stayed. If you are now 7 minutes over time, you're still with us. You heard a lot. I want to give you last time the opportunity. Do you like to react if you want to comment on anything you heard?
Yes, I would like to make a quick reaction, and with respect to the time and to the fact that we are over time and many people have to go to other meetings. So just very quickly, with regard to the, I have a paper for took notes for all of you. So with regard to the region, Mr. Marin, thanks a lot. Very interesting ideas there. Very important points that you are mentioning with regard to the data, data sets, proactive market uptake activities, and user needs. However, these are beyond the scope of the EU or of the EU Space Act. I think these more relate to the vision and the EU space economy, so we can take that up there. The comment which you had, which relates to the EU Space Act, is the one on the role of the regional governments, and there I have to tell you that we actually do not define on the type of division of roles within each of the member states. So as we don't touch on the authorization processes in the member states, in case the regional governments are involved, then that process, of course, is as is, and we don't need to mention that, but it's the competence of the national member states to be in charge of their own processes. We don't interfere on that. This is a competence of member states. With regards to, thank you very much, Gisela, for your very encouraging comments. I would like to underline that indeed we really value the expertise of ESA. ESA has been a long-term partner for the European Commission in implementation of the EU space programs. We also recognize that ESA is a driver behind technical standards for space activities. And as it was said by Gisela correctly, we will elaborate on the way how the relation between ESA and how the conditions will be implemented through the international agreement that we need to sign in accordance to Article 108. With regard to the comments of Olivier, Eurospace, taken into account, we had another exchange with your companies previously, so I think we don't have to go into details. That was in details discussed, the positions. The comment that comes back also from the comment of Mr. Pajot with regard to the costs, and also to the last speaker, Dr. Lenz, there I have to say that indeed, I mean, compliance comes with a cost. What is necessary to understand is that what kind of benefit do we get for those costs? And then for me, the fact that we are aiming to make sure that the conditions for launching and for operating the satellites are much safer, and the fact that we are protecting our future space activities is an important and a very important objective that needs to be taken into account when we look into the cost perspective. So with that in mind, I think if practically, if you need to pay and align with requirements that would improve your safety of your satellites and the satellites around you, I think this is the cost that is worth taking. Thanks a lot. That's all from my side.
Okay, thank you. I think Maria had already left. She wanted. Okay, then I think I thank all participants and speakers. We collect the questions. If there are open questions, we will also send them to the Commission to react and share the link to the presentations and questions with you after the event. And I apologize. Unfortunately, the speaker from the European Commission, Ms. Elena Donatsan, she cancelled this morning her participation. But we intend to have another session on the EU space package due to the interest it came, and we want to hear also other views from the Parliament and also maybe other stakeholder views. So stay tuned. There will for sure be a next edition.
Super. Thank you very much to all of you that listened to us this morning. It was a pleasure, and we are looking forward exchanging with you. And please use the opportunity of the open consultation to submit comments. We are open to discuss them further in detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roya. Same here. I'm still here. Same here. If you have further questions on the Competitiveness Fund, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Yes, yes. Maria, if you had wanted to react anything,
unfortunately,
I very appreciate that.
I'm already late to another meeting, so but I'm happy to address further questions by email.
Okay, thank you. Then I thank everyone, and I think we can close, and I hope you enjoyed the session.